Hello,
Got
everyone. This is Ronnie from the Love Fruit podcast, and today is a special day. I'm joined by a wonderful guy, like someone that I've really loved a lot over the years and admired a lot, who I met a number of years ago. And he is one of my original inspirations for changing my diet and my life, as his YouTube channel used to say, change your diet, change your heart, change the planet, or something like that. I can't remember the exact phrase, but I'm joined by Tim Van Orden, and Tim is a guy that has some incredible achievements. He is, as a runner, just as one part of his life as a runner, he has some amazing achievements. American record for, I'm looking at, I've got the list here from Tim's website. American record for the 50 plus road mile, 17 US Masters and senior gold medals, two-time US Masters Trail Runner of the Year, two-time US Masters Mountain Runner of the Year, US Champion Snowshoe Half Marathon 2017, and uh, fourth in the Stair Climbing World Championships. And I'm sure there's more to that. But what the interesting thing is, I've never really heard you shout from the rooftops about any of these achievements. And I would say if someone, and maybe this is, I don't know if this is a compliment or not, it might not be. If someone bumped into you in a place and started speaking to you, I don't think they would go, this guy's probably a incredible like masters champion athlete. That you like you there's not that arrogance about you or whatever that might people might associate with that. And yet you've achieved these amazing things. And I'd also like to say that Tim is has had a YouTube channel for many years and put out a tremendous amount of helpful videos. And I believe that he still coaches and helps people with various aspects of their life and diet. And Tim is one of the best ever speakers that we've ever had in the movement of raw food, veganism, healthy living, all that stuff. He is really very powerful presenter. So, Tim, would you like to say anything else more about yourself?
it.
An introduction?
Well, I was wondering who you were talking about there, and then it turns out it was me. So the ironic thing is, Ronnie, that one could think that I must think pretty highly of myself due to my resume, but I have continued to go after big national titles and records and things like that because my profound insecurity makes it very difficult for me to believe that I've done enough for anyone to take interest. Not interest in me and not interest in my athletic career,
Yeah.
but interest in the movements or choices that I have made that I think have value, like eating a vegan diet.
Mm.
Running Raw, the original project I started in 2006, it wasn't about, hey, look at me, I'm going to become an elite athlete. It was, I'm going to eat a raw vegan diet and see what's possible as a man in his 40s attempting to become an athlete on this diet that most would consider deficient and restrictive. But I suspect that it's going to yield some performance benefits. Let's find out what happens. I don't know. And so in 2006, that was the mission. Let's see what I can do. And now it's 19 US championships later.
Wow.
Uh, and I've, in the past year, turned myself into a cross country or Nordic skier as an experiment yet again. And I was fourth at the World Championships last year, 1.8 seconds behind second place.
Yeah.
So that was the biggest surprise to me because I've been skiing for a year and a half now,
And
and I
the
wanted to see if I could apply the same principles that I applied to running, if I could
yeah.
apply them to an entirely different sport and get similar results. And the answer is yes.
In the world of athletics, you'd be described as a beast. You're
Yeah,
a
I hear
beast.
that.
You're a killer. You're a whatever the word is. But it's funny because there's these words like that, and you see a lot of stuff when people look at content for motivation about high level achievement in especially in athletics and physical stuff. It's very like there's an aggression to it. There's like there's this sort of like um I don't know, like go out and destroy yourself, like go out. I don't know. It's like a really macho sort of whatever. And a lot of those guys, people like you and other people that I've met, would absolutely eat those guys up, but with a smile on your face. And like, like no, it's just so funny to me. Like, there's different ways that people find that elite level of performance. It's not always about this and I think I've heard you speak about that you're not so much of a fan of some of the things that you hear out there about um do you know what I'm talking about? Do you
Yeah,
get
I do. And this is something that I hear on a regular basis, that I'm a badass or a beast. I've heard that. Or machine. I've heard people locally call me the machine. That's how I'm known in this town. And when you say, this no pain, no gain, or mind over matter attitude, very strict, man up, harden the F
yeah,
up.
don't be a pussy.
Yeah, that's not just something that I disagree with uh, as an outside way of going about it, but it's also something that I've employed myself in the past. And now I'm very much, I don't want to say going back on who I was when I started this whole endeavor, but I've learned so much that now my experiment is not to try to hold on to whatever athletic ability I can as I age. I'm going to be 55 in 6 months, but it's okay, let's see how much more gentle I can become and get even better.
Mm.
So rather than toughening up and bracing myself for this inevitable decline as I age, it's like, well, how about I just get more and more relaxed and more gentle and more curious and more detached from the results? And I have a suspicion that that's going to actually improve my performance. And that has proven to be the case.
And that's fascinating because I think that a lot of people would suggest you need to like have a specific goal and a specific plan and be disciplined and like doesn't matter if you don't feel like going out and running or going out and training. You just got to do what you don't want to do and doesn't matter how you feel and all that stuff. And yet I get the feeling that that's not you.
Not at all, not anymore. No, used to be. And here's the thing, Ronnie, when I did that, um, I came out with a video series in 2012 called, maybe 2011, called Getting Started. And that was at a point in my career where um, I was attempting to hold on to my stair climbing status. Up until that point, I was one of the best stair climbers in the world and arguably the best in the country. And this is running up buildings like the Empire State Building or the Sears
Yeah.
Tower in Chicago, things like that. And I just wasn't doing the training because it's so hard and so painful that if there was any mental fluctuation at all, if any new stressor showed up in my life, the thing that would give was my training, because it was
Right.
just, it was brutal. And I've got videos on YouTube from 2010, 2011 of me doing these just insanely painful training sessions and hating every minute of it. And so in 2011, I got to the point where I just stopped training altogether. And it had been weeks. It was in December, and I deal with seasonal affective disorder. When the light goes down this time of year and it gets dark early and cold, it's been below zero every morning for the past week and a half. It's a tough time of year.
Yeah.
Um, and I was just stuck, and I thought, I think I'm done here. I think the Running Raw project has come to an end, and so have I, my relevance, because if the project disappears, then I disappear along with it. So I reached out to YouTube and I said, okay, hey, I'm going to give this one last shot. And hopefully, by holding myself accountable to you, my audience, maybe I can muster enough willpower and determination to do what's necessary and just try to get one more good race out of me. And that is so opposite of who I am now. I I can't remember a day where I didn't train at least an hour. Most days it's 2 to 3 hours. So far in October, I've trained 100 hours just in October.
Wow.
I've logged 800 hours for the year so far today. I just looked because I thought, I think I might be close to 800 hours for the year, and that was today. And I never push myself. I don't have a plan or a to-do list of exercise anymore. I just allow myself to gently move into whatever my body feels that it wants to do. I get out of the way and it guides me to, on average, 3 hours of training a day. And
Do you think that you could have started like that, or do you think the experience you had prior and getting to the point you got to allows you to do that now, or do you think you could have always done that?
well, there's two different things to consider to answer that question. One is, could my body have done it? And the answer is yes. The second thing is, did I have an awareness of my identity to the degree that I do now? And the answer is no. So it's not just, has my body transformed itself to the point where now I can do this? No, this would have been possible all along. And I know that because this is how I coach people now. So I coach people to follow this kind of free range, off leash approach to physical engagement. Like basically just let your child run and scream when it wants to run and scream. Like if my child wants to go run up a mountain, which it did before this call, I let it go. I can feel myself itching that it needs to move. And it's like, all right, I guess we're going to go move now. And the way that that happens is that you have to recognize that your identity, your will, your goal setter, your reputational self is just a small part of who you are. It's not you in your entirety. I mean, we have many different versions of ourselves, and we all know that if we spend any time thinking about it or looking back at our experiences, especially when it comes to diet. I witness my family on a regular basis whenever we have dinner. One of them will say something like, I cannot have seconds. I've got to start losing weight. That's it. I'm just going to eat one helping. 5 minutes later, they're over at the stove putting a giant thing of food on their plate. And I'm like, I thought you weren't going to have seconds. Well, it's been a hard day. I worked a lot, and it's going to be cold tonight. And I need it. And it's like, well, how you didn't need it 5 minutes ago? Like, what just happened?
Yeah.
Who's in charge? Who are you really? Are you this singular thing that you think yourself to be, or are you a multiplicity? And the answer is that we as human beings are a multiplicity of characters. We just have a general sense of self, but it's so inconsistent. And identity is one part of that. Our reputational storyteller, goal setter, is just one part of that. And if I step around that person when it comes to diet or when it comes to physical engagement, there's very little that I can't do. But if I put that guy in charge, well, he's got really low self-esteem. He's incredibly insecure. He's got something to prove. He thinks that he needs to push hard. He thinks that every workout he does needs to be impressive. He's going to break my body. He's going to bury me. He's going to get depressed. He's going to be disappointed if he doesn't win the race. So I can't put him in the driver's seat. So who do I put in the driver's seat? The part of me that just is a being in the world and loves to play, loves to engage, loves to move, loves to watch ski races on the TV while I'm on my elliptical machine. And I get into the motion of the skiers. I'm not thinking about it. I'm not thinking, okay, I need to do 30 minutes on the elliptical. I put on a race and then I get into it. My body wants to go with the people on the TV. And then all of a sudden, oh, wow, that was an hour and a half. I guess I'm done.
Well, what I would like to do is get back to this topic a little bit, but maybe we can start out. I'd like to, traditionally, I sort of ask people, um, obviously you're on a vegan diet now
Yeah.
and an athlete and all this, but was that part of your upbringing? Was that, did you grow up conventionally, or how does that all look?
I grew up in a hunting state where I still live. So one of the rites of passage for a boy growing up here is to kill a deer, or some, kill moose and bear as well. But that was the thing that you had to do. You had to go out and hunt and prove your manhood and get the deer and then strap it to the hood of your car and drive around town with it so everybody could see that you're a man.
Uh,
That's the culture I was raised in.
uh-huh.
So, a lot has changed since then, but I I never wanted to kill things. It just
Yeah.
didn't feel right, but I ate meat and I ate a lot of it. And I drank a ton of dairy. We lived across the street from a dairy farm. And so we'd get fresh milk. And I would drink probably a gallon a day.
Wow.
So, it was a pretty clean diet. My parents were somewhat hippies. They moved to Vermont to escape New York City to have an organic farm and be hippies. But there was a lot of meat. We had our own chickens that we killed, and a lot of meat from the, farmers across the street. And so it was pretty clean, but it was far from vegan.
So your parents were actually from New York.
Yeah.
What were they? Did they have like kind of corporate jobs before that, or?
My mom worked on Wall Street, and my dad had just passed all the exams to be a New York City cop. And at the last minute, they decided not to do that. That they didn't
Wow.
raise kids in that.
Yeah.
So they escaped north to be hippies. It was the late 60s.
Right. Okay. Okay. Excellent. And I believe I believe part of it is a blueberry farm, or is it entirely a blueberry farm, or what? What is the state of it now?
Yeah, so we had 400 high bush blueberry trees, I call them, because they're over 2 meters tall. Now we have about 300 left. So disease and bears and other things have killed about 100 of them, but we get about 15 liters per bush per year. So it's a pretty substantial amount of blueberries, but now it's more of a hobby. I'm the blueberry farmer. Everybody else has kind of just decided they no longer want to be a part of it. So it's something I do in the summers. I take care of the blueberry orchard.
Oh wow. And does that get, where does that go? Does that, is it sold to a distributor or farmer's market, or how does that get dealt with?
Sometimes farmers markets, sometimes local stores, sometimes a farm stand.
Mhm.
It's had various iterations, and I'm so busy doing other things that I can't dedicate myself to
Yeah.
that full time. So we only pick maybe 15% of the crop. The rest goes to the birds and the
Oh
bears.
no way. Wow.
Yeah, just I've always wanted to have the Woodstock Fruit Festival come to the farm and just pick berries for a couple days. Like, hey, let's bring a bus. I'm an hour and a half away from the festival.
Oh my God. I can't believe you've not done that.
You can, well, it's, there's liability issues and
Right.
whatnot, but I've brought Tony Wright there a few times to pick.
That's amazing. That's brilliant. And are these like blueberries that no one's ever tasted? Like, are they like way beyond what's in the shops and stuff? Or
So I'm sure this is the same with any kind of fruit that you buy in a store, uh, not a farmer stand, but a store versus straight off the bush. You've never had a blueberry unless you've eaten it straight from the bush.
right, right.
And there's a lot of reasons for that. One of the things that people don't consider is that blueberries ripen in the summer. It's generally pretty hot. So a blueberry is warm to hot when you eat it.
Oh, wow.
But you're never going to eat a hot or warm blueberry in the store. In fact, if you bought
Yeah.
hot or warm blueberries, you'd think that was repulsive. But when you eat them off the bush, the flavor, because they're probably 35 degrees Celsius, straight on the bush. They're just baking
Wow.
in the sun. And they just, the flavor is, the whole experience is so dramatically different
Wow.
than eating a blueberry in the store. There's no comparison.
Wow. I never thought about that. And what was your health like growing up? And obviously, it sounds like you weren't ethically in line with, killing animals and eating meat, but did it have an impact? Did your diet growing up have an impact on your health? And was blueberries a big part of your diet growing up?
No, I was never really much of a fruit eater.
Hmm.
We also had strawberries, and I learned to hate strawberries just because that's a hands and knees on the ground kind of job. As a kid, weeding strawberry plants just made me hate the fruit. So no, my diet was pretty bad. I hated vegetables. I wouldn't eat anything green. Um, it was pretty much whatever version of junk food I could get, which wasn't really super junk because my parents were, organic hippies. Um, and then when I went off on my own, went to college and beyond, I became a fast food eater.
Hmm.
Pretty much lived on fast food. And that didn't change until I was 30 when I switched to a vegan diet. And my vegan diet was pretty crappy as well until 2004 when I became raw.
So
So the majority of my life, I, had a horrible diet.
did it affect, did you notice any impact on your health as a result of that?
Well, one of my keys to success, and that I don't mean that on a grand scale, I just mean personally. I I take things on as experiments because if I take it on as a commitment, I know that I'll fail. And I don't want to set myself up for depression or disappointment because I have a tendency towards depression. And when I make a commitment and then witness myself default on that commitment, that can lead to depression because it's like, well, you just, you can't do anything. So every change I've ever made in my life, I've languaged it to myself as an experiment. So when I switched to a vegan diet, it was only at the insistence of my girlfriend at the time. I had just moved in with her and she said, no animal products in this house. And I was like, what? So she gave me a long list of things that would occur if I went vegan. One would be that I wouldn't lose my hair, my skin would stay younger longer. It's the fountain of youth, she said. And I thought, okay, I'm an actor. It'd be nice if I looked younger for longer. I'll try it as an experiment. I'm not committing to this. But within a week or two, my sleep improved so dramatically that I stayed with the diet because I had been an insomniac for the vast majority of my life. And suddenly I was sleeping. And that was so new to me and so needed that it's like, well, why wouldn't I remain vegan? That right there is worth the price of admission. It wasn't about animals and it wasn't about the environment. Initially, it was vanity, but vanity was quickly replaced by I'm sleeping and I'd like to remain sleeping at night.
Wow. Now,
And then, yeah, go ahead.
well, I wanted to go back. Was acting, was that the main thing for you in the early part of your life?
Well, it's fascinating. Again, who I am now as we have this conversation and who I have been historically are so alien to each other that anybody that has known me for the past 30 or 40 years, they're like shaking their head like, I can't believe you became this guy, because I know who you were and I don't know how you became the guy that you are now. It doesn't make sense. I became an actor because I would fall down on anything I ever tried to do. I just couldn't do anything consistently for long. I would fall into a depression. I have a very, very fragile ego or identity, and it just goes into trauma mode at the snap of a finger. And so whenever I tried to do anything, I would fall apart pretty quickly. And I thought, well, I need a job where you only work a couple months a year. And then you get to maybe take a couple of years off, and then you work a few months and take a couple of years off. And what kind of job? Acting. Yeah, that's what it's like to be an actor. I thought that was the only thing I could do, honestly. I thought, well, I either try to make it as an actor or I commit suicide because I don't see another option.
That was
I
when you're in your teens that you were thinking that.
no, I was terrified of being an actor in my teens. I didn't start acting until I was in college. At the encouragement, I was a skier,
Okay.
a cross country skier, and I had a mentor. She told me to take dance class. She said, it'll be great for your balance, great for your kinesthetic awareness. And I was embarrassed as hell to take dance class. But I did, and it opened something up in me. And then I thought, well, what about acting class? Like there was an expression that wanted to come out, but I was so painfully shy and insecure that I thought, well, there's no way that I could be an actor, but maybe I can learn how to pretend not to be shy anymore. Maybe I can create a persona that I can go out into the world with, and I won't appear as fragile as I know myself to be. So I took acting classes to try to build that false exterior. And what happened instead was that I learned how to actually get in touch with something beneath that fragile identity and found a really grounded place that became more and more defined the more I was on stage, but only when I was on stage. I couldn't take that out into the world.
Hmm.
So I thought, well, maybe I have this talent for acting, so let's see if I can make a career out of it because I can't do anything else.
I'm quite fascinated by acting as a practice, and I've done a little bit of drama in school and that kind of thing, like a lot of people have. Um, and there's something unusual about the idea of embodying emotions that aren't real, and or creating a real emotion out of an unreal situation that you're going through, and creating a character and all. And as you were saying, like I think the thing you said about creating a persona, and a lot of people, I think that's part of what everyone sort of does to get through life to some degree, is they have a persona, and many people sort of their persona maybe is who they are, or it takes over or whatever. I don't know exactly all about this, um but this idea of acting is like continually creating these different, and I guess bringing out different parts. It's no, people just talk about it as an art form, I guess, but it seems almost like it could really open up something in people. It is, and it seems to be you're suggesting something like that.
Yeah, I don't see it as an art form, and I should be clear that film acting and stage acting are two dramatically different experiences. Um, Stage acting, there is an arc, and you're moving through this arc in real time with an audience present.
Mhm. Mhm.
Whereas film acting is so um, disintegrated, meaning that I can be in this moment now totally unrelated to anything that happened a moment ago. They set the cameras up and they're doing a close up on me to get a particular emotion, to get a particular response, but it's not a response to something that actually just happened. I have to make that all up in my head. I have to imagine or pretend or embody that something just happened. Whereas on the stage, that's not the case.
Right.
So I don't recommend film acting because it is a disintegrated experience. It and they even film things out of sequence. But stage acting, you're very much in real time not pretending. See, this is the mistake I think most people make when they act.
Mm-hmm.
You're not pretending to have these emotions, you're having these emotions. And it's you that you're portraying. You're just speaking somebody else's words, inhabiting somebody else's situation. If I were in this situation saying these words, what would that feel like? But they're your feelings.
Yeah.
And it's really about taking ownership and using yourself as the canvas. Like, I am the canvas. And when I say these words, I'm going to really put myself into that situation. And I'm going to discover for myself in front of an audience what that's like to be in that situation and communicating this with someone else. I don't know what that's like yet. Let me find out, honestly. And I'm safe because it's scripted. I
Mm.
don't have to worry about the unknown. And that's, for me as a shy person, this is one of the biggest breakthroughs in my life when I discovered acting, because nobody was going to hurt me. I could really embody this experience, and I could really embody the words that I was communicating, and there was no consequence. Whereas if I do that in the real world, if I just walk up to you and I risk communication, there could be consequences.
Mm-hmm.
But I was protected by the script, by the scene that was taking place, by the story. So it allowed me to be a much greater expression of my instrument, let's say. So I think acting is one of the most profound experiences that someone can have if they really allow themselves to have it, rather than pretending to be someone else. You're not pretending to be anyone else. You're just being yourself in a situation that's novel for you.
That's fascinating. And I'm a little bit aware of. I've had a few conversations with you about your some of this, I guess, some of the successes that you had as an actor, and that you did work as an actor, and maybe some people even that follow you don't realize that. And um, how did that all take place? And what could you tell us a little bit about your story as an actor?
Yeah, again, it's a tragic story, because it's a tragic profession for the most part,
Right.
regardless of what the image that people have of Hollywood and celebrity. There's so much fragility and so much um, just negativity. So I started as a stage actor, again, because it was this profound opening for me. It was the only time that I could be honest in front of people, is when I was on stage speaking somebody else's words. Now, I wasn't communicating with my own words, but I was communicating honestly with my feelings. And I had never done that before. I had always hidden, I had always
Wow.
pretended. So for me, pretense was my default state. Acting was the only time I stepped out of pretense. So
Wow.
that was such a shock to me when I discovered that that was available. Um, so I did a lot of stage. I went to Washington, D.C. after college and did some theater there. And I got noticed by some people from Los Angeles. They wanted me to come out and do some industrial films. Um, but I got scared and decided not to go. So then years later, I decided to go to Los Angeles, bought a motorcycle, and I had never ridden one before, and decided I was going to motorcycle across the country from Vermont to California. It's like 3,000 miles. And if I didn't die on the trip, because I had no experience on a motorcycle, if I didn't die, then I would stay in Los Angeles, and I would stay there for a year because I imagined it would be a horrible place to live. Um, but the motorcycle trip turned out to be a tragedy. So I ended up coming back to Vermont. And then a few years later, I bought another motorcycle and tried again. I don't know why the motorcycle theme, but it just felt like the badass thing to do. I was trying to kill a part of me. I was trying to just wear away this thing that I was disgusted by, um, that I had been pretending to be my whole life until that point. So I finally made it out there for real in 97 and worked in casting as well as working at restaurants. And I learned more about acting, working in casting, like casting who's going to be in the film and TV show. That was the greatest acting experience I ever had. But then I booked a bunch of commercials, did some TV films, did a lot of voiceover for radio and for commercials where you don't see the person, you just hear their voice. And it wasn't a huge success, but my commercials did quite well. I had, some gigantic national commercials that played for years. And that's nice to get those paychecks rolling in.
Oh, is that what happens? You continue to get paid for it.
Oh, you get royalties, yeah.
Wow.
So the more they play it, the more you get paid. I had one commercial that played during the NBA playoffs, during the World Series. Didn't play during the Super Bowl. That would have been nice, but
Did you ever get people recognize you from that?
yeah, oh, quite often, yeah.
Quite a lot. Wow. Yep.
Much more from YouTube. That's the funny thing. I get, I can go anywhere and it's likely that somebody will recognize me from YouTube.
Really?
Yeah, and that always surprises me because my audience is not that large, but there are a lot of people tuning in, and it's a little bit disconcerting that I'm known by people around the world from a YouTube channel, much more so than my acting career.
So were you acting when you went vegan and met this girlfriend and stuff?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that was the kind of the beginning. I was in LA for about a year when she and I got together and I decided to be vegan.
Mm-hmm.
But the acting thing is a rough business, and there are a lot of predators, and I fell victim to some people that had bad intentions. And like I said, it was a pretty tragic story, but that's fine because it opened up other doors for me, and I chose different pathways, and I'm here now, and I like where I am.
You always hear a lot of things about Hollywood, about like the negative side of that. And obviously there's a lot of people that go and try and make it, and must be like, hundreds of thousands of people or whatever, huge number of people that don't get anywhere or whatever. And
they're really good. They're very talented people, and nobody knows that they exist.
Yeah. And but as you're saying, like there's this other side, this idea of like people being taken advantage of and strange things going on. And obviously there's like Harvey Weinstein and all that stuff came out. So there's a lot of shadiness that seems to be connected with it all. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, now I'm not going to say that that's the norm, but it exists. And, it's like there are some neighborhoods that have a high rate of violence. It doesn't mean that if you go into that neighborhood, you're going to be a victim of violence, but the likelihood increases. And the Me Too movement opened people's eyes probably more than they had been opened before to the casting couch in Hollywood. Right. But other than Kevin Spacey, I don't think it was made all that clear how much this affects men as well as women.
Wow.
And that story never really got told. Like, I'm straight, but there are a lot of predatory men in Hollywood who are not straight. And this is not a comment on someone's sexuality. Mm-hmm. It's just that people put themselves into positions of power so that they can prey on people that are willing to do whatever it takes to get a role. And you'll be put into situations where they're like, do you want this? And it's like, yeah, well, how bad do you want it? Will you do anything? Yeah, I'll do anything to get it. Oh, will you? Well, let's see if you'll do anything to get it.
As blatant as that. Wow.
Yeah. It's it's an art form. be a predator. And you never know what you're getting into. You're innocent, and you think, wow, this person likes me, and they've got my best interest, and I'm going to be a star, and they're promising me all this stuff, and
Yeah.
They lead you down is it the primrose path? Is that
The Primrose Path. It's funny. I have a friend that referenced that, but he was in the army. It was like some kid. He used it in some. I don't know. I think he called. Funnily enough, I think he had a tattoo studio that he called the Primrose Path or something.
oh,
Anyway, I don't know exactly what it is, but yeah. So it is interesting because with you talking about your fragility, it almost seems like that would be almost like not the right profession to have chosen, because it seems to me that there's a lot of rejection in acting. Like you go to a lot of auditions, and that's to me like not getting a job is one thing, but not getting an audition is like when you're talking about the experience you've been through, where when acting is like you've been bringing out the truth of this honest part of yourself and exposing that, and then not being picked is like, wow, that's like really crushing on a different level. And then obviously being so open in front of all these audiences, it's curious. It's interesting that although you say it was a profession you picked because it would fit in with you, it's also, I guess, it must have been quite challenging as well for you.
yeah. And well, again, I can say that it's tragic if I tell the story one particular way from the perspective of my identity. But if I step outside of that perspective and I look at the tools that were made available to me from having those experiences, then I can see that I've modeled that same experience again and again and again in different ways ever since. So if I'm being vulnerable in a purely honest, emotive state in front of someone and they reject me, okay, if I'm doing that as an identity, that could be terminal. That could be a permanent mark on my sense of self or my self-esteem. Like, you are being rejected. You brought yourself forth fully, honestly, vulnerably, and they're like, next. Like, sorry, we don't value who you are.
Yeah.
And the one thing you have to realize that identity almost never realizes, you are not right for this role
Yeah.
in this moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not that you are bad, it's just that you are not right for this role. And quick story, on my resume, I had knife throwing, because you want to put all kinds of stuff on your resume to make you look interesting and to start conversations mostly. Like, oh, look at that, knife throwing. And then they bring you in just to have a conversation about it. So my agent calls me up and says, hey, I've got an audition for you. And it had been a while, for a big national commercial. And they need a knife thrower. And it's like, I'm not really a knife thrower. I grew up throwing butter knives at squash on the farm with my dad. My dad taught me how to throw butter knives.
I've actually seen a clip of you doing that.
Yes, and the first year of the Woodstock Fruit Festival, we took the watermelon rinds that were empty and we lined them up and had knife throwing until the camp said, no, no more. But I had a knife throwing class year one at the Woodstock Fruit Festival.
Yeah, a nice safe class for everyone. Knife throwing.
People loved it. Oh my God, they were having so much fun. It was great.
Yeah, that
It was
is.
a little bit of a disaster, but they're butter knives.
It's in the film from the first year. Like one of the highlights from the first year's Woodstock is a clip of you like jumping in the air, twisting and throwing a knife into a watermelon.
Oh, I got to see that. That's funny.
Yeah, I was always curious about that. That's so funny that came up. I was like, how did that happen that Tim's randomly throwing a knife into it?
Yeah, because I grew up on a farm and I played with knives.
Right.
So back to this story, the agent's like, all right, they need a knife thrower. And it's like, I'm not a professional. I'm a guy that literally throws butter knives. She's like, go, 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 just go anyway. It doesn't matter. So I get to the audition, and there's all these circus performer looking people with the typical knife throwers outfit. And they've got these rolled up leather, I don't know what you'd call them, knife holders that they undo the leather strap and they roll them out, and they've got all their professional knives in there, and they're sharpening knives, and the waiting room is full of these guys, and they all know each other because it's the knife throwing community. And so, so and so, he's like, so how'd you do in Vegas? Oh, it was great, da 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 da. And oh, hey, weren't you just at the World Championships? He's like, yeah, well, how'd you do? Yeah, I won. So literally, no exaggeration, the world champion knife thrower is sitting next to me.
Wow.
I don't have any knives with me because I don't have a leather thing with butter knives shoved in it. I had nothing. So anyway, we're sitting in the waiting room, and we keep hearing thud, ding, because the knives are not sticking and they're hitting the floor. So when you hear these big, heavy throwing knives hitting the concrete or tile floor, it's making an awful racket. So person after person, you hear the knife hit the target, and then you hear it drop onto the floor. And everybody's getting really nervous because we haven't heard a single knife stick yet. So people are starting to freak out, and guys are coming out and they're like, what's happening? They're like, you can't stick them. It's plywood. You can't, these knives don't stick in plywood. I'm like, oh shit. But they're like, don't worry about it. They're really just looking for the type. So finally they call me in, and they're like, where are your knives? Oh, I didn't know I was supposed to bring knives. It's a knife throwing audition. I'm like, do you have a kitchen? What do you mean, do you have a kitchen? Yes, we have a kitchen. Well, hold on, I'll be right back. Where are you going? I'm going to the kitchen. I'm going to see if you have any butter knives. What? You're going to throw butter knives? Anyway, this woman led me into the kitchen. I found a couple butter knives. They just had lunch. They were in the sink. They were dirty. And they're different sizes and lengths. So I pull out like 3 or 4 random butter knives that don't match. I wipe them off. I bring them back in. And there's a woman dressed totally in black, very New York City look. She's on the phone, and she puts the phone down and she says, seriously, just don't waste our time. Just please call the next person in. I'm like, no. I can throw these. She's like, no, you can't. I'm like, yes, I can. So the other people looking at it, they're like, are you sure? And I'm like, yeah. And I take a knife, and they're like, wait a minute, stop. What? Aren't you going to measure your steps? No. Well, the other guys measure their steps. They paced out an exact distance from the target. They're like, you're not going to do that? No, I eye it. I throw it by eye. That's how I learned how to do it. So they're like, okay. So the woman gets back on the phone. She's talking again, completely ignoring me. So I take the first knife, feeling the weight because I've never held this knife before. And you feel it. It talks to your hand. And it's stuck in the wood.
Oh, wow.
And it stayed because it's a butter knife. It's not thick. It's not a throwing knife. They're very thick and heavy. Butter knives have a very thin blade. They don't weigh much. So it hit the target and it stuck, and they started screaming.
Wow.
And the woman put the phone down. She looked over and she's like, hold on, I got to call you back. This guy just stuck a butter knife. So they're like, do it again, do it again. And like the festival, I said, do you want me to do a trick? They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, I can jump up in the air and do a 360 and throw it. They're like, no, you can't. So I jumped, did a spin, threw the knife, stuck it. And they were jumping and applauding and going nuts. And I threw another one, it stuck. And this is not boasting. Butter knives are pretty easy to throw if you have a little bit of practice. Nothing extraordinary about it. And of course, they're going to stick better in plywood than a throwing knife is. After a couple minutes, they asked me some questions, and the producer took me aside and said, thank you so much. You made our day. That is the most fun that we have had all week. You're totally wrong for the role. You don't look the part at all. But man, thank you so much for just making our day. And I walked out. And all the guys in the room are looking at me like, who the hell is this guy? Why were they cheering for him? How come we didn't hear any knives falling on the floor? And they were like, they're all whispering and talking. I'm like, oh my God, who's that? And I walked out with a puffed chest. Anyway, the point is this. In that moment, there was a realization that stuck with me forever after, that you can do your best. You can knock it out of the park and still be wrong for the role.
Yeah.
And that if you can recognize that, and that you don't need someone else's validation to tell you that, because you're not always going to get people applauding you and jumping up and down and cheering. Sometimes they may think to themselves, wow, I really love that, but they're just wrong for the role. But they don't tell you that. They just say, next.
Yeah.
So that was a huge moment for me in recognizing that it's okay to be wrong for the role, that there is a me that will be right for some role, but it's not someone else that determines what that is ultimately. If I keep putting myself in somebody else's hands and say, please, please make sure, look at me, maybe I'm right for the role. But what if I just put myself out there on my own? What if I just start communicating without someone's permission? What if I put myself into the position of running raw? I'm going to start a YouTube channel and a website. Nobody asked me to do that.
Yeah.
Nobody said, hey, we're selecting you to be the guy that does this. So I don't have to be right for that role. In fact, I was wrong for that role. I was terrible for the role of running raw. But thank God I did it, because it was such an incredible educational experience that I've become a guy that I never, ever imagined I would become. I don't, this guy is completely unrecognizable to me even 15 years ago.
Wow.
So, it all comes back to now stepping outside of the need for your identity to be validated by other people and even by yourself, and just moving into the things that really empower you, and practicing the things that you love to do, and also putting it out there for someone to notice if they so choose. Like, if somebody doesn't watch my YouTube videos, do I take offense to that? No. Because I like making them. If nobody listens, that's okay, because I got to listen to it. And that doesn't mean that I love to hear myself talk. It simply means that it gave me an opportunity to really think deeply about a particular topic, to spend some time figuring out, well, how do I feel about this? How would I do that? And then I record it, and then I edit it to make sure, yeah, okay, yeah, that is how I would do it. Okay, that wasn't really clear before, but now it's clear. And then I share it because it made a difference to me first. And nobody has to approve. Nobody has to watch it. It doesn't matter, because I keep getting smarter every video I make. Helps to make me more educated, even if nobody ever watches it.
Well,
Okay,
I
I'm done
love
with
that story. That story was amazing. But so let me bring myself into the story a little bit, because when
Please
I
do.
when I my friend shared a video at Earthlings, and I watched it, and there's a whole story leading up to that, me being ready to watch that and everything. But
Yeah,
I watched that and I was like, okay, I think I'm gonna go vegan, because I just thought I don't need to be part of that. I'm not really eating animal products that much anymore anyway. And then it was like, okay, I didn't know anything about it, health benefits. I didn't realize there was any benefit to it. I kind of thought there might be a bad side to it. So I was looking up, you know, the same questions everyone looks up. Where do you get your protein and all that stuff?
yeah,
And I come across the video, The Protein Myth. And I kind of had the conspiracy theory. I was like a conspiracy theory fan before that. So the idea of a video called The Protein Myth was like kind of
yeah.
like attractive to me, from that, oh, there's maybe another side to this. And it was your video, and I think it's maybe only a 5 minute video, 5, 6, 7 minute video, but that really switched the light on for me, because out of the blue, it wasn't just vegan video or a protein video. It was you talking about raw foods as well. And in that particular, at that time, and in that video, you were saying like, people ask me where do I get my protein, and is it from nuts and sprouts and blah 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 and supplements, and at that time you're saying I don't eat any of that. I eat fruits and vegetables, and you talked about the amino acids, and you talked about how if you weren't getting enough protein, how come you had more muscle than you should have, and you were out competing people half your age, and that just had such an impact on me, and it really answered a lot of questions. It was the first time that I thought, because the idea of living on fruits and vegetables or primarily that or whatever, it's not that strange a thing to have thought or to have wondered about. But you always assume like you couldn't really do that, no one can do that. But for someone to say it and put it forward as an idea and say and it just makes you think, and it makes you go, well, wait a minute, he's talking about being stronger, actually. He's not talking about being weaker, he's talking about being fitter. And then you start to go, well, chimpanzees, gorillas, like they're all stronger, like and it just all of these things kind of fell into place. And that was my um first little opening into the whole concept of raw foods, and even the whole concept that a vegan diet could be a healthy, beneficial thing. Um and so your impact's obviously had an impact on me, and that's led to other things that I've done as well over the years. And part of going to Woodstock was to meet you as well, and learn more from you, and hear what you had to say. Um, so what led up to that point in your life where you were out giving speeches in front of audiences and things like that? How did all that develop?
Yeah, it's never something that I planned on doing. It was never a career path. There was a group in Chicago. They called themselves Run Raw, and they wanted to run the Chicago Marathon. There was a group of maybe 5 or 6 of them, and they wanted to do the Chicago Marathon, 2006, I think, and do it raw. And they had never heard of anybody running a marathon as a raw foodist and being maintained at the aid stations with raw foods, coconut water, etc., dates. So they found me on YouTube. They're like, hey, look at this. There's a guy who's a raw runner out in Los Angeles. They reached out to me and they're like, could we pay you to come to Chicago and train our group for a week or two for the Chicago Marathon and help provide support during the race? Help, okay, what should they eat prior to the race, the night before the race, during the race? Like, could you help organize all that? And I'm like, well, yeah, that'd be fun. So I went to Chicago. I met with them. They were amazing. The marathon was incredible. Many of these people are, still my friends now. And the woman that organized it all, she was also the head of the Chicago Raw community. And she said, if you stick around a little longer, we're going to be having a raw vegan Thanksgiving, and I would love for you to talk at this event. And I was like, oh, wow, that, how many people are going to be there? And it'll probably be a couple hundred. Okay.
Wow.
And I was really scared because she's like, just share your story. Just talk about what you do and how you came to be this and what the performance and results are like. And I did. And the audience was incredibly receptive. And then another woman there said, you know what, who was also part of this Run Raw team. She said, I think we should take this on the road, and I think we should speak to running clubs all over the Midwest. So I decided to stay longer. And we drove around the Midwest from Chicago to Minneapolis to Milwaukee to Kansas City to St. Louis and we would reach out to running groups and say, hey, or raw food communities, meetup groups, and would you like to hear this raw runner give a presentation on what he's experiencing on a raw vegan diet as an athlete in his 40s? And, there were yeses across the board. So before I know it, I had given like 10 or 12 talks. And then I had to go back to LA and go back to work. But this group in Chicago was like, all right, let's plan the next round. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, well, you have to keep doing this. People love your message. And then they reached out. I'm an introvert. I'm incredibly shy. So they were hugely supportive of me. They reached out to some people in Los Angeles and said, hey, we think that you should have Tim speak at these groups in LA. So then I started speaking in Los Angeles. I met up with David Wolf and did some talks with him in the San Diego area. Did some talks in San Francisco. Started, becoming a fixture in the California raw food scene on the speaking circuit. And then I thought, okay, let's really ramp this up. There are a lot of national championship races that I'd like to do around the country, and I can't afford to do them. It's a lot of travel, and there's a lot of stair climb races I'd like to do all over the country, but I can't afford to do them. So I'm going to reach out to a raw food group or a running club in each one of these cities. And if I can book a talk and get paid to give it, I will go do the race and the talk will pay for the travel. And that became kind of the engine for this. It fueled my races and it allowed me to not go into massive debt to keep this thing alive. And then it just all kind of spiraled from there. And here we are.
Wow.
But it
And
was a hustle,
yeah.
it was a hustle.
it's that's pretty amazing. And I actually think I might have been to that Chicago raw food group because I was in
Yeah.
Chicago once. Yeah, I
Oh,
was with Mike Lassity one time in Chicago, and he took me
yeah,
to a group.
yeah,
There was a meetup.
yeah. They're an amazing group of people.
Um, but getting back, what was your journey from vegan to raw foods?
So I primarily ate a vegan junk food diet. In Los Angeles, there were lots of vegan bakeries and vegan pizza and burrito places, and um, you could get vegan chili cheese fries at several different joints. Like it was vegan central out there. So my diet sucked. Um, and I was working at a vegan restaurant, and I would take care of raw foodists coming in. Once every couple of weeks, a raw foodist would come in. Lou Corona, I don't know if you know Lou.
Yeah, look Corona, yeah.
He was coming in all the time. He would get a gigantic salad with avocado, and then he'd give me a lecture about the benefits of raw food and tell me about all the different ingredients in the salad and what they did. And so he kind of felt the need to mentor me.
Did he show you his plank and stuff and some of his physical?
No, he never did any planks at the restaurant, but the man's got a serious core, I'll tell you that. Um, and then there were other people too. Justin Bua, who's a graffiti artist, he would bring in cacao beans and he'd give me these raw cacao beans and tell me about the benefits and raw food. And then there was this other couple, they were billionaires. They would come in and talk to me about it. And so over the years, I got to know these people pretty well, but I never wanted to eat a raw diet. It sounded insane to me. But then my health started to fail. And depression came on pretty strong. Chronic fatigue came on pretty strong. And it got to the point where my boss brought me in and said, I got to let you go. When you're here, you're not here. You're like a ghost walking around. And I said, I know, I'm sorry. I'm falling apart physically. And I don't know what to do.
Wow.
So word got out at the restaurant. It's a vegan restaurant. So it's a small community, even in Los Angeles. Everybody knows everybody. So a lot of these people were really concerned for me because I gave a couple weeks notice, and several of them said, hey, you got to switch to a raw diet. And I'm like, yeah, it's not going to happen. And finally, this billionaire couple, they're like, here's the deal. We like you and we're willing to invest in you. So we're going to take you to every raw restaurant in Southern California, and we're going to get everything on the menu, and we're going to pay for it, and you're going to try it, and we're going to find a way for you to be a raw foodist. You're going to have so many different things to try that there's no way you're going to reject all of them. And then we'll figure out the things that you do like eating, and then That'll be the foundation of your diet.
Wow.
So they did that. They for maybe a week or a week and a half, they just took me from restaurant to restaurant, and I was like, okay,
That's
this doesn't suck.
incredible.
Yeah, there's some really extraordinary things that I can eat, and I enjoyed it. And I said, all right, I'm going to try this for a week as an experiment. And at the end of the week, I started feeling normal again. And that was surprising to me because it happened so quickly. And then I thought, I'll do it for another week. I never planned on doing it for more than just a blip because I didn't think it would work and I thought it would be awful. But at the end of that second week, the transformation was so profound that I thought, I I gotta I gotta do this. If I want to live, I have to do this. Because I was imagining myself being homeless. I thought, I can't work. What am I going to do? I'm too shy to ask for help. I'm going to end up homeless. Um,
Wow.
and eating a raw diet just turned all of that upside down. And after a year, I got my job back at the restaurant. Um, and I became a photographer. I had been a photographer, but just as a hobbyist, and I started doing it professionally, taking actors' headshots, and that allowed me to not be at the restaurant full time because it was too stressful. And then after a year, my whole body had transformed. I looked like I was 18 again. I just had so much energy, and I was sick and tired of people like David Wolf saying that you're going to have more energy on a raw diet. Everybody says it, but I was experiencing it, and nobody wanted to hear me say it. Prove it. Show me.
Mhm.
Like, talk is cheap. You're all bragging that you have more energy on this diet. Show me. So I was a runner in high school and 1 or 2 years in college. And I thought, well, what's a better metric for human energy and endurance than running? It's pretty much a level playing field. It's not about the equipment like cycling. Um, so I started running just to see if I actually had this energy or if I was just fantasizing. And pretty quickly discovered that it was yielding real world energetic results. And I started the Running Raw project shortly thereafter with the goal to make a US Olympic trials and win some national championships, and just to demonstrate that a raw food diet was pretty extraordinary. And if I could do that, I thought maybe I can get other big athletes to switch. And if they switch, maybe they'll impact kids who look up to them. And maybe this is a way to change the diet of the youth in America.
Wow.
Getting other, I never expected to be the guy on stage. I thought if I can demonstrate this through some pretty big results and make a documentary about it, which became a YouTube channel, then other people will change their diets. Maybe Michael Jordan will decide he wants to start playing basketball again as a raw vegan. Or at the time, these were the people that were, Andre Agassi had just retired from tennis. Maybe Andre will pick up a racket again as a raw vegan because Martina Navratilova had done that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe I can get the people that do have a platform, maybe I can get them to make a change. So that was the goal. It's never supposed to be about me.
Wow. Wow. And I mean, that's such a cool story of, of how that happened. And um, the Running Raw project was an incredibly ambitious goal, but that's like a great thing. Like, and I suppose it's interesting. Like, um, well, I would the first thing I want to ask about what you're kind of talking about there is that at that time there was it feels like there was a raw food movement in LA and California that was quite active, and you're talking about a bunch of different raw food is coming into your restaurant and talking about it and people being excited about it. Could you give a picture of what was going on then? Was there a community there in LA? Was there talks? Was there a scene?
Yeah, and I think every generation has a moment where something is coming together in the perfect mixture with the perfect people at the perfect time, and it just kind of explodes onto the scene. And I was just in the right place at the right time with the right people. And David Wolf was doing quite well with Nature's First Law, which turns out that he basically plagiarized another book. But that's a different story. Um, then he also had the Sun Food Diet Success System. Paul Neeson had come out with his books. Gabriel Cousens, Matt Monarch had written a book. Um, uh, Brian Clement, like it was everybody was just coming out with their stuff. And it seemed like it was all happening around the same time. Giuliano, who was my neighbor in Los Angeles, had opened a restaurant in San Francisco called Raw. And then he opened one in Southern California too, in Santa Monica.
Wow, he's your neighbor?
He was my neighbor. Yeah, literally my next door neighbor.
Just coincidentally?
Just coincidentally. I used to watch him. There was a parking lot between our houses, and I used to look out my window and I'd see him twirling in a dress. He'd be out there twirling around, listening to music in a dress, and I was just fascinated by watching him twirl. And Rainbow Mars, who is I forget if she was just no, it doesn't matter. She was part of that scene as well. She was over there a lot. And David and Lou Corona, Matt Monarch, I used to go to his house. We would have raw parties. John Rulak, who was the CEO of Nutiva, he was part of that scene. So he was my sponsor for a while. Rory Friedman was one of my best friends. She wrote the book Skinny Bitch and then 7 other books about veganism. And she would have these big vegan potlucks where, Sean Munson, who made Earthlings, like everybody,
Wow.
the potlucks at Rory's house were huge. Everybody who's everybody in the vegan world was there. And I would bring raw stuff. So like I was introducing all these vegan celebrities to raw foods. Alicia Silverstone, you name it. Like it was all happening in this one
Wow.
bubble, this kind of inclusive bubble. And everybody kind of was blowing up at the same time. Brendan Brazier was a good friend of mine. Brendan founded Vega, the sports. Like he was at my house all the time. We would have these potlucks. I would make everybody raw vegan ice cream out of coconut milk. Like it was just it couldn't happen now. It couldn't happen here. It was just the perfect collision of all
Right.
these people and raw foodism not being seen as an ideology yet, or not being tainted by particular personalities on YouTube. Like it was innocent, and it was
Yeah.
raw, and it was emerging, as like, hey, this could be the next new thing. And there were all these voices popping up, and I reached out to Doug Graham at one point and said, hey, I'm trying to be an athlete, and you seem to be the only person writing a raw food book that knows anything about athletics. Like I've asked everybody else and they don't know what to do. They're like, yeah, that's not our not our thing. So I asked Doug to train me and give me a diet, and I didn't follow it because it was just too expensive. Like the diet he wrote up for me, it's like, Doug, that's like $150 a week in fruit. I can't afford that. And his comment may have been something like, well, how much is your health worth? How much is your success worth? If you want it, that's how much it costs. You just got to figure out how to make the money. Just go make the money and then do it. And I'm like, oh, but it was amazing, the collision of all that stuff and where we all are now, all the different things that have come
Yeah.
out of that, and the people and the events of Woodstock and UK Fruit Fest and all the YouTube dramas and controversies, and some people disappearing and new people emerging. And
There's what there is. The interesting thing what you're saying to me is it was what you were experiencing at that time was there was still, maybe the word is also like a complete mystery around it in terms of what is the
yeah,
potential of that
yeah,
in terms of um because not many people had ever done it or ever seen it. So could an athlete go to the Olympics in their 40s? Like who knew? No one really knew if that would be possible or not. Maybe it is that life changing. Um, is it the secret to enlightenment? Is it the thing that makes people take 20 years off? Like I think now there's more people that have done those experiments and
Yeah.
we've got more awareness of what the benefits are and what the limitations are and stuff. But I can imagine at that time there was a sense of like there was still a great it was unexposed, it was unexperimented, but was that maybe part of the feeling as well?
Well, absolutely. It was like you were getting, well, at least me being in, I lived in Venice Beach in Los Angeles. So I wasn't just in Los Angeles, but I was in the epicenter of the raw food movement. And there was no YouTube, there was no Facebook, there was no access to what we have access to now. So it was like it exists here. It's the people and the culture, and nobody else knows about it unless they've read one of these obscure books that one of these people has written.
Yeah,
And these are not the kind of books you find in the bookstore. They're the kind of books that somebody gives you.
yeah,
Like somebody gave me a copy of Nature's First Law at the restaurant. I didn't go to the bookstore and seek it out. There was no raw
yeah,
food section or even vegan section at that point. So if you weren't part of one of those insular hubs, like LA, like Chicago, a little bit in New York City, a little tiny bit in San Francisco, if you weren't a part of that, then you were completely left in the dark, which is one
yeah.
of the reasons I wanted to go around the country spreading the message. Because where would you find this information otherwise?
The interesting thing is to me that you're talking about there was no Facebook, there was none of the social media, right? However, you're also talking about there being raw food communities and groups and restaurants and like hundreds of people being at these things. I think you would struggle today to find many groups of hundreds of raw fooders getting together at potlucks and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Like, oh yeah, there's more people online, there's more awareness of it, there's more something out there, but they were still getting people together back then, whatever way that was getting out there. Like people were still finding out about it and finding community and maybe it was even better in some cases. I don't know, but um,
It's
I
changed.
yeah, I would rather be at a 200-person group in real life than on a Facebook forum. That's for sure.
Or sitting alone watching YouTube
Yeah,
videos, a playlist of, 20 different raw food or vegan videos, but feeling totally disconnected from these people.
yeah,
And you don't know them. You'll never meet them.
yeah,
Uh, like the community element, I wouldn't be where I am today without that community element.
yeah,
Had I just watched somebody's lectures on YouTube and that was the catalyst for me to switch to a raw diet,
yeah.
I wouldn't have done anything public about it.
That's what I feel about Woodstock. Like I left Woodstock like having met all these people, like having seen the vision of like here's some people who did it for 20, 30 years or whatever and thinking like that's implanted in my head now. I've been with them physically beside them,
Yeah.
talking to them, watching their body language, their emotion, everything. They're taking all that in and leaving that event with this huge group of people thinking like we're all together in this and I've got all these people like we're all supporting each other and stuff. And the funny thing is you go back a year later and so many people aren't back or they're not into it anymore or they've went away, they're not even vegan anymore. Like but in my imagination like everyone was doing it. Like I was thinking like I wasn't the only one.
Yeah, Ronnie, I am not the right person to do this simply because I am such an introvert. And the older I get, the more I just want to dive into research and reading and study and philosophy, um, and experimenting with my body in the world of movement. But I I would love to facilitate someone else to bring community back. And this is why I think the fruit festivals are so important. Anything like that. It doesn't even matter if it's exactly your cup of tea. You don't need to be a fruitarian to go to the fruit fest of any,
Yeah,
whether it's Woodstock, UK, or anywhere else. But just to be around people who are doing something with some degree of alignment, I think is so important. And I want to support that wherever I can, because we're becoming more and more insular. We're just disappearing into our own feeds and data streams, and substituting that for the connection that actually makes a difference.
It's still like for me, it's like a tribe, you know, and it's like the first time in my life that I was immersed around people that socializing wasn't alcohol, drugs, cigarettes, you know, and junk food, and everyone had kind of read a lot, even outside of the raw. Okay, everyone had watched a lot of the same videos and read a lot of the same books, but a lot of people had read a lot of books that weren't raw food related. They'd read the same personal development stuff, you know, some of the same spiritual stuff, or certain topics people all kind of had similarities as well. There was quite a lot of symbiosis, or whatever you would call it there. So it's but my kind of why I'm bringing this up a little bit as well is I've tried to have a fruit luck group or a potluck group here, and it never took off. Like I could get a bunch of people coming now and again, and it would just and try and keep it going and try and keep it going, and it never really got out there. And I don't know what I was doing wrong, or I mean, sometimes I even tried to advertise it, and then I was like, I'm putting money into this, and like it's all free. Like I was made it all free, and I don't know. It never, but I mean, the festival has worked out, but that's a different thing. So I'm jealous of the people that have had these big potlucks and stuff, because I could never. I always thought like it needs like a beautiful woman at the center of it, or something. Maybe that's what
It doesn't hurt, but not necessarily. So I forget if it's Malcolm Gladwell's Tipping Point or Outliers. It doesn't matter. It's one of his books. He talks about the character Paul Revere, who outside of the United States, most people probably have no idea who that is. But here in American history, when the British landed in Boston, to basically say, we're not letting you be independent, and it was the start of the Revolutionary War, Paul Revere and several other people left Boston on horseback, shouting, the redcoats are coming, the redcoats are coming, because the British had these red jackets that they wore. Like, they're here, get ready, everybody take your guns and pitchforks and get ready to fight. So we don't know about the people that were not Paul Revere that went out and said the redcoats are coming. But Paul Revere is the one that we all learn about in school. He's the one in the history books, but he was one of many. And so Malcolm Gladwell writes a huge section in this book about Paul Revere type characters. Why do some names get remembered and others not? And in his analysis of journals and descriptions of Paul Revere, looking at people's letters and communication, he was an extrovert. He was super social. Everybody knew him. Everybody loved him. And he didn't run through the streets saying, the redcoats are coming, the redcoats are coming. He would knock on a door and say, hey, Ronnie, how you doing? It's been a while. Just to let you know, the Brits landed. So, you know, is Martha around? You know, let's where are the kids? You know, I haven't seen them in a couple of weeks. How are they doing? Let's make sure everybody's like, he went in and he took care of people. He didn't just simply run through the streets delivering a message. He knew the people, he cared about the people, he attended the people.
He was a well-connected person.
Well-connected.
I think Malcolm Gladwell called that like there's a name for that, like someone that's like a really well connected, has a huge network.
Yeah. The only term I remember is the Paul Revere.
Right.
But there were early adopters. He had a bunch of names. But the point is, in my experience and observation, groups that have a Paul Revere will grow and succeed. Groups that do not, it doesn't matter what information they're sharing. It doesn't matter the quality of the experience. It doesn't matter how much fun people had. If there's not a Paul Revere at the center, the group will die. And that doesn't mean that you have to be the Paul Revere. It means you got to find one. or it could be a Pauline, there's a running group just over the border in New York State, in Albany. So at the festival, you probably fly in and out of Albany or take the train to New York City from Albany. So just over the border from here. And my friend there, Josh, started a running club. And Albany's not a huge city, but his running club now has over 1,200 members in it.
Wow.
1,200 members.
Wow.
Because Josh is an extrovert, because Josh loves people, because Josh remembers people's names, because he's fun and he's always introducing people. And he'd be like, "Hey, Ronnie, do you know Tim? Tim is at that. And Ronnie, oh my God, Tim, you would love Ronnie. Ronnie's done this. And he'll talk for 5 minutes about each of us and then walk away and let us have at it. And he does this all day long for as long as I've known him. And he's built this gigantic community where they're constantly having running potlucks and they put on races together, and he'll get 100 volunteers for each thing that he puts on.
Wow.
They have huge races. There's a gigantic racing community in Albany now because of Josh and the massive volunteer network that he's built to host these events, like world-class events. And watching him and other people like that, Christina Carrillo Bucarem too, in the Houston area, just tirelessly engaging with people and building this gigantic community there. And like, that's not me.
Yeah, right.
I would love to have that community here, but I'm not the guy that builds community. I serve other roles and I serve them well, but I don't fill that role. I'm not right for that role. And that's okay.
Yeah.
So, but you need to find the person that is right for that role and bring them in, and then your community will thrive.
Can you talk about the evolution of the Running Raw project and how that led to YouTube and then how that channel grew and things like that?
Yeah, well, growth doesn't necessarily always mean up. Things can grow in all manner of direction. Evolution isn't always forward.
Yeah.
So it started basically as a documentary series chronicling my attempt to, do extraordinary athletic things on a raw vegan diet. But then it became about the talks that I was giving. I would put up a lot of talks, clips from these talks. And the one thing that I kept bumping into again and again at the talks I was giving, a lot of people knew what to eat. They just weren't doing it.
Yeah.
So if you know what to do and you're not doing it, well, what's the missing piece there? So I wanted to try to figure that out. And then I turned the lens around to look at myself and say, well, I'd like to be a better runner, but I'm not doing the training that I know would make me a better runner. Why is that? If I want to do it and I know what it is, why am I not doing it? If I want to be healthier and I know what to eat, but I'm not doing it, why is that? So I started studying psychology and neuroscience and philosophy and Buddhism. And that's been going on for 15 or more years now. And that's primarily what I do now. And through that process and taking what I've learned and experimenting on myself, I've evolved the Running Raw project into more of a compassionate approach to the things that are in your best interest. Like, how do we take that first step? We know what the step is. We're motivated to take it, and yet it doesn't happen. So I've been trying to build a roadmap to step one.
Yeah.
So I had the Getting Started series, which didn't start from a compassionate place, but has evolved into one. So now for me, it's primarily about psychology. Yeah, I can talk about diet if you want. Yes, I can talk about running if you want. But really what I want to talk about is how. How do you do it? And who's doing it? We have to know who it is that's making the commitment, and we have to know who it is that's taking the step.
So for you, what is the primary, because as you're saying, there's loads of people out there that kind of have an idea of how to eat healthier or live healthier or exercise, or they want to do that. And for the people that grew up like that, that makes sense. Like they've been doing that all their life and all that kind of stuff. But I suppose what you're talking about is the thing of making a change in life. And I've started to learn that it's actually very rare, almost that anyone makes a big change in their life or lifestyle, and that almost very few people percentage wise of the population actually want to make any actually truly want to make a change. And what is it that makes that difference for those people that have been able to make that change? Um, do you have any idea of what are some of the primary reasons why they were able to do that, and when so many people struggle?
Yeah, so we could talk about, I'll use the lens of motivation, but we're going to deviate from that. So in motivation theory, you've got intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So extrinsic motivation, there's something outside that I want. There's an external thing that is pulling me into this. Intrinsic motivation is, I like it. I have a desire to do it. It's an internal drive. The energy or the fuel is coming from inside. I'm compelled to do it versus if I do it, I get something. So intrinsic motivation, I've already got it. I've got the thing, and now I just want to go express it. Extrinsic motivation, I don't have it yet, but if I work really hard, maybe then I'll get the reward, I'll get the gift. So this is how most psychologists would frame this conversation. Where is your motivation coming from? Are you trying to get something at the end of the process, at the finish line, and you believe that there's a reward worth suffering for? Like, what kind of pain do you want? Like, we all have to have pain in our life, and you get to pick what kind of pain you want to have.
Yeah.
Is that method? Or are you simply compelled to do it? And if you're compelled to do it, well, maybe then it's a matter of you just don't know about it yet. I'm already compelled to be healthy. I just don't know that veganism exists until I watch a YouTube video. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. And suddenly I'm vegan the next day. Or I'm raw or fruitarian because I just didn't know that even was a thing. But now that I watched a couple videos, well, why wouldn't I do that? I'm compelled to do things that are good for my body. There's no discipline or willpower necessary. So the first lens to look at it is, where is it that the motivation is coming from? Is the motivation in alignment with something that already exists inside you intrinsically? I have a desire to be healthy, and it's just a matter of learning more about what brings about health, and then I'll just keep making a correction as I discover newer and better things that guide me down that path. Or is it the desire to change something, the extrinsic, like I hate myself. I hate the fact that I feel like crap all the time. I hate my body. I want to transform it. I want to look like that guy or girl over there. Or, I want more money, or I want a better relationship. I want people to like me. And if I do this and I really put the time in, then maybe I can get that result. And there's plenty of people that will promise that you will get that result, and they'll charge you for it. So number one, where's the motivation coming from? Number two, which I think is even more important, and this is where the bulk of my research and communication and coaching is now focused. Who is it that's going after it? So this goes back to what I was sharing earlier in this conversation, that identity is just one aspect of who and what we are. And if you have a fragile identity, you're going to constantly want to prove something. You're going to constantly need to increase your rank somehow, or at least desperately maintain your rank, because you're scared to death of falling off the bottom of the group. So how do I stay in this group? How do I keep people interested? How do I get more people interested? How do I get that person to like me or want to be with me or want to do business with me? So as an insecure person, I could put an athletic goal out there that's about proving something, and it's all driven by identity. So it's extrinsic. But what I do now is just allow my body and who I am as a being outside of identity. I can think, I can operate, I can function, I can have this conversation without needing to protect or establish an identity. I can just talk about concepts. I can talk about who you are and raw food and exercise, whatever, but I don't need to care about how it's being perceived by anyone. And the moment you care about what other people think, you're inside your identity. The moment you're wondering, well, what if are they going to like what I have to say? You're inside your identity. If you don't care if anybody likes it, you're outside of your identity. So if I can set an athletic goal outside of identity, simply out of curiosity, what happens if I do this for 6 months? Why 6 months? I don't know. It's an arbitrary number. Why this particular training? I don't know. That's also arbitrary. It's an experiment. But wouldn't it be interesting to find out what would happen if I did that for 6 months? Let's find out. I'm curious. That's exciting. It's a brand new thing. I've never seen anyone train like this before. I may fail miserably, but I will have learned something, so it doesn't matter. And I didn't really fail miserably because there's no identity to be miserable or to rate it as a failure. I simply collected data. Identities want to know, did I succeed or fail? Outside of identity, it's like, well, what data did I collect? And how can I use that data to inform the next step that I take? Okay, great. I spent 6 months doing that. I did see some benefit here, here, and here. So I'm going to take those pieces and incorporate them into another experiment. And I'll try that for 6 months. And I'll take the pieces that are valuable and I'll incorporate those into another experiment. Meanwhile, identity's like, yeah, but you're not winning anymore. So I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm enjoying this. It's fun.
Yeah.
There is no disappointment. So when it comes to succeeding, is it internal or external? And who wants it and why?
Mm-hmm.
And this is the difference between these two types of goals, the curiosity experimental goal and the identity needing to maintain or improve its rank.
Right.
The identity doesn't benefit until the desired result is achieved. But even then, that identity is going to discover that the life-changing end of the rainbow pot of gold doesn't actually exist. And you're just going to have to jump through those hoops all over again, hoping that maybe 2 national championships will finally tip the scales. Oh, maybe 3. It's got to be 10. Oh, God, maybe 15? Or if we step outside of that and say, well, I don't care if I win. I don't care if I'm 20th place. I just love playing in this arena. I love exploring my body in the midst of movement. I love trying training modalities that are non-standard and seeing what the result is. It's fun to collect all this data. And every now and then I will hop in a race to test it out. Is it working or not? I'm going to find out next weekend at the New England Cross Country Running Championships. I barely run anymore, maybe once or twice a week. And that's rare that I run once or twice a week. Many weeks I don't run at all, but I do all this other kind of training. And it's fun to show up to a running race with 100 hours in my legs for the month of October and see what I can do.
Yeah.
And there's no expectation and there's no failure. So when it comes to diet or anything else, is there the possibility of failure? If there is, it's not going to work.
Sure.
So if you've set it up as a game that you can lose, it's not going to work. If you've set it up that it requires willpower, it's not going to work because willpower is a very limited resource.
So bearing in mind what you've just said there, could you maybe talk about, I was pretty blown away when I heard you say that you had the American record for the road mile for 50 plus.
Yeah.
And I was like, when you said that, I was like, is that what I was trying to figure out like, is that what he's saying? Is he really? Is that what he really means? Like, isn't that like an incredibly high achievement or whatever? So, what's how did that? What was the training like for that? Like, did had you set that intention? Like, what? How does all this fit in with that happening? For example.
So this is a hard thing to talk about because it would be really easy to take credit for it. And it would be really easy for people to hear me being proud of myself, which I'm not. So I want to be very careful when I talk about this because I think it's incredibly useful and I'm still learning from it. So in 2019, I was not running much. And I've had a series of injuries that have been with me since 2013, bone spurs in both Achilles tendons. I have arthritis in my left ankle. I break toes on a regular basis, trail running, kicking rocks and roots. Um, lots of different things have occurred that have made running more and more problematic over time, which is why I've transitioned into cross-country skiing, less impact. So in 2019, I was running a little bit, and went to Sweden for the month of June, July, I forget, a good chunk of the summer. And I was walking a lot there with my girlfriend. She's not a runner, so I couldn't run and have her next to me. So I was doing my Bigfoot walk, which is something that I developed in 2017, again, at another period of injury. It's how you walk when you're filming something. Like in California, the Steadicam operators, they're people that they walk around with cameras and they do a certain kind of walk to keep the camera from bouncing up and down. And you're kind of you're not in a full lunge, you're in like a 30% lunge and you heel toe with a lot of tension on your quads and your glutes. And the goal is you don't want your head to bob at all. You want your head to be perfectly steady as you're walking. And that way the camera is not going to be going like this up and down. So I was filming trails in Vermont. I did that walk for months. And then my team asked me to jump in a 5K. This is 2017. And I said, hey, I'm not running at all. And they're like, yeah, we need a third guy for the team. We don't care. Just show up. We need a third guy for the team. It's the US championships. We think maybe we can get a bronze medal if if you're 20th place. So I went to the race really having low expectations and I ran a 15:57 for 5K. So I was 49 years old, 2017. I was 49 and I hadn't been running.
So
And
for people that don't run, and I'm not a very up with the running times, but I think that that's a pretty great time.
that's a very solid time. In fact, it got me, I think I got the bronze medal in the 45 to 49 age group. I think I got the bronze.
Mhm.
So it's national caliber running. And they do what they call age grading. So they take world champions in their 20s at any age, and then they do a statistical regression analysis of their times as they age. Like somebody that was the world record holder at 24, how fast do they run at 28, at 35, at 40? And you can track and, okay, well, what is the world record at 40 in this particular event? And how does that compare to a 23-year-old world record holder who slowed down over the course of their career? So they project out and do what they call an age grading. So 15:57 age grades into the 13 minute something. So that is basically, almost Olympic caliber.
Wow.
So it's fast. It's super fast. To break 16 minutes in 5K is an accomplishment. And I did it without running. So that was like a big switch that went off in my head, but it was one data point. So I've been experimenting with this Bigfoot walk, I call it, because you look like the videos of Bigfoot walking through the woods because you're kind of low to the ground and your arms are hanging really low because your knees are bent. So it looks like you have super long arms, like you're an ape walking through the forest. So that's why I call it the Bigfoot. And you take long strides.
What do
Anyway,
you, what do just a total aside, what do you think about Bigfoot?
ah, I don't know.
Other people where you are that have seen that or believe in that or anything?
No, but when I was out in the Pacific Northwest giving some talks, one of the people that would host me on a regular basis and set up many of the talks that I gave there, her husband partner is like the head of the Bigfoot Association in the Pacific Northwest. He's the guy.
Right, right,
So I got to hear all the stories and look at all the evidence that they had, and I'm inconclusive. I don't know enough to have an opinion on it.
right, right. Okay.
Do I think that there are creatures in the world that we haven't discovered yet? Absolutely. Um, do we know everything about every living thing on Earth? Hell no. We don't even know how we work yet. I mean, the human body is still a mystery to the human body.
Sorry, getting back to
Yeah, so this Bigfoot walk, I've been experimenting with it since 2017 because that was such a huge result. Without doing any running training, that it keeps cycling back into my training regimen. So in 2019, I'm walking with my girlfriend around Sweden. That's where she lives. And doing it real slow so that I could walk at her pace. So it kind of amped up the challenge of it because you're in like a low stressful position, but in slow motion. And you're just really grinding through the muscles as you walk. So I did that the entire time I was in Sweden, 5 to 10K a day. And then I got back to the States and flew into Boston, and I was looking for a race because the national championships was coming up. My team needed me again. And I thought, well, I should probably do a little bit of running before I go to the national championship because I didn't trust this Bigfoot stuff yet. So I should probably do something. And there was another big trail race that I wanted to do as well. And it was a 30-kilometer trail race with 1,500 meters of gain, and super, super treacherous trail race. And I wanted to do well there. But crap, it's 30 kilometers long and I'm not running, I'm just walking. So I get to Boston, I find out there's a 1-mile road race just north of Boston. And I thought, I'll do that on the way home. So I enter the race. There's a bunch of people there and that know me from other races. And they call me TiVo in the running world here. They're like, TiVo, you're not a miler. I'm like, I know, I haven't run a mile since high school. They're like, well, why are you? And it's like, well, it was the one race that was available and it's short. And so I ran the race and I ran a 4:41. And after the race,
wow.
The race director said, you broke the course record for over 50. I'm like, no kidding. And then another guy on the team, another guy who was not on my team, but is now on my team. We call him Granny, Scott Granfield. Scott said, I think you just broke the American record. I'm like, what are you talking about? I didn't break any American record. That's ridiculous. He said, you're not even a miler. What the hell, man? So I looked it up and the American record was 4:48 on the road, not on the track, but on the road. It was 4:48 and I just ran a 4:41. But it's not an official USA track and field sanctioned race. So I reached out to the heads of USA track and field. And I said, hey, I think I just ran faster than the American record. How do I enter a sanctioned race and see if I can actually do it officially? So they said, well, the national championships are in Flint, Michigan coming up. And we'll pay your way there. If you're going to go for a record, we'll finance you to go do that race.
Wow.
So they paid for a hotel, and I went to Flint, Michigan with Granny, and it was a hilly course. It was an awful course. There was a strong headwind. It had way too many corners. It was the worst possible course to hold a 1-mile race on, and I ran a 4:46. So not as fast as I could have run. But it was the American record by 2 seconds. And it blows my mind because here's the thing though. After I did that 441, there was a part of me that said, oh, well, now you've got to start doing mile training. If you're going to go after the American record, you've got to start training like a miler.
Right.
And the other part of me is like, no, 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 no. You didn't get here by doing mile training. You got here by doing the Bigfoot walk. Walking got you to that 441, not running. So I had to be really, really diligent with myself because my identity was so desperate to get that record that it's like it wanted to sneak out and secretly run when I wasn't looking. It wanted to go to the track and do intervals on the track at high speed. And it's like, nope, nope, we're not doing that. We're going to walk. I'm really curious to see what kind of results this walking can yield. And lo and behold, it was a 446 on a very hilly course. That record has since been broken. So now it's down to 440, which to me makes sense. Why couldn't someone, if I can run a 441, why can't someone run a 440? So now I want to go back and run in the 430s and break it even further.
Wow.
But I want to do that without run training. I want to do it with this walking as my main modality. So anyway, I've completely turned my training into this giant experiment. I don't do any standard training anymore. So when I go to the New England Cross Country Championships next weekend, I'm going to do so without running training.
And I guess that goes against the conventional information about how you should train for a championships like that.
For running in general, it goes against. So I'm on the elliptical, which is behind this curtain. I have an elliptical machine over there, which I'm on for usually an hour and a half to 2 hours a day. But my heart rate never gets over 110. In fact, my heart rate rarely gets over 100, which means it's very comfortable. And when I'm doing this walk, my heart rate is almost never over 100 or 110. So it's a lot of volume, but at a really gentle, super comfortable intensity. And that seems to not only make me enjoy training a hell of a lot so that I want to do it 3 hours a day, but it also yields some pretty extraordinary results. And after I did that mile race, I did that big 30-kilometer trail race in 2019, and I shattered the record for over 50 by like 8 or 9 minutes. And that's a race that is legendary in the Northeast. Like everybody has thrown themselves at that race trying to get a record time. So to be that far under the record and to do a 30-kilometer race without running as my training, again, it's an experiment. It's not boasting.
Wow.
Like I really want to collect experimental data, and then hopefully other people will try it. Like you're injured and you can't run anymore. Well, maybe you should try some of this stuff and see what happens.
Amazing. I want to, yeah. I was good. Well, what I was wanting to go on to really was how it is that you help other people and what it is, because I know you do coaching, but how does that look and what do you offer? How do you work with people?
Well, coaching, it started as people wanting dietary advice or dietary plans, and then running advice, like a lot of people that wanted to be raw athletes. So I got some people that just wanted help with raw diet plans, but it was mostly people wanting to be raw athletes because the fact that I am an athlete intimidates a lot of people. They can't see themselves in what I do, which to me is so funny because I have the least amount of discipline of anybody I know. It just looks like I'm a really disciplined person, but I'm not at all. I'm super gentle and just allow my body to engage in what it wants to do. My diet was never about discipline. It was always about eat what you like. And if I like banana ice cream, then I'm going to eat it. If I like salads, I'm going to eat them. If I don't, I'm not. I'm not going to force myself to eat something I don't like. So that's how it started. But again, kept coming down to, well, I gave you the diet plan, but you're not following it. Or I gave you the running plan, but you're not following it. So I started to feel really guilty. Like, I can't take people's money if they're not going to follow the plan. I feel like I'm failing them somehow. So again, the insecure core that I have just started to want to coach people for free until I could find a way to get them to stick to it. And what I've discovered in the process is that human beings are far more complex than they realize, or than I realized, than almost anybody realizes. And that change and transformation is a really slow process unless you're somebody that already embraces change and transformation. And if you're reaching out to me as a coach, that's not you. You're not somebody that already embraces it. So it's going to be a really slow, iterative, experimental process. You're probably going to be inside of your identity when you're taking the steps that I'm asking you to take, even though I'm going to try to help you find a way to take them outside of identity. Chances are you're going to beat yourself up. You're going to label it a failure if you wake up and have coffee one morning and you committed not to. And so then I'm going to have to help you to be gentle with the fact that you're waking up, with a coffee headache, or you binged on pizza the night before, but you're really desperately wanting to be vegan. Okay, well, let's just work with what is in the most gentle way possible. So I no longer feel guilty if people don't instantly change. I no longer expect people to instantly change, and I no longer expect people to be able to follow my instructions, not because they're incompetent or stupid, but because they're human. And the more I study, the more I realize how difficult it is to recognize who you are as a behavioral being. So we have our thinking self. We have many different versions, but the most important one is the behavioral self. And it doesn't matter what the planning self or the thinking self has committed to. The behavioral self is the one that's actually going to engage in behavior. And if they're not on board, if they didn't sign up for the coaching plan, it's not going to work. So I want to meet that version of you. I want to meet your behavioral self. I want to sit down with them. I want to learn about them. I want to see what they're interested in. I want to see what small modifications or experiments we can engage in that work with the behavioral self, and slowly play our way into transformation without a top-down willed approach. So it's unlike anything I've ever come across. I don't even know how to describe what it is that I do. There's no label for it. It's not like I've had coaches, I've had therapists, and this is neither. It's, I don't know what it is, but well, I guess what I call it is the title of my book, A Compassionate Approach. It's compassion is the core of it, and it's an approach. It's not about a destination. It's like going towards a lighthouse. You don't want to arrive at the lighthouse. That's a very bad thing. But the lighthouse can help you guide you on your journey. You just don't want to arrive there. So we're always approaching something, and there's going to be milestones and lighthouses along the way, but we never arrive anywhere. We're just always approaching something. So there is no destination in my coaching, nor is there a destination for me as an experimental athlete. There's no one race on the horizon that I need to put my flag in the ground once and for all and claim victory. It's just going to be, until I die, it's going to be this evolutionary journey that I'm on that continually expands and shows me things, teaches me things.
Amazing. And for people that wish to learn more from you, reach out, communicate with you, where can they go?
So Running Raw is still my YouTube channel. YouTube just came out with YouTube handles. I haven't looked into them yet, but you can have a handle now instead of your channel name. That's a brand new thing. So if I get a YouTube handle, it'll probably be my name, Tim Van Orden. Otherwise, Running Raw on YouTube. My website is timvanorden.com. If you go to runningraw.com, it'll transfer you to timvanorden.com automatically. And yeah, YouTube and timvanorden.com. That's the best way to see what I'm up to. And I'm not a big poster on social media, other than YouTube when I can. Because I don't want ever, I don't want to bombard people with information because it's just not who I am. So when I have something to say that I think is of value, I'll share it on YouTube.
So what to kind of come to an end to some degree, although I think hopefully we can speak again another time.
Hopefully, definitely. I always love, and I'm sorry this has been so one-sided, Ronnie, but you ask really profound questions that get me to think about things, and then I never stop talking.
No, I love that's the aim, you know. That's what I think. That's in fact that's the best feedback I always get is that I don't butt in. That I just let other people talk. So people are quite happy that I do that. What's the future for you? And maybe personal, but also maybe what do you see in the world, in the vegan movement, whatever way you want to take that question.
Yeah, well, first off, I want to make a comment about you, because you and I have had many conversations in person and online, and you are evolving as a facilitator of conversation. And I just want to acknowledge you for that. Because this, not that any experience I've ever had with you has been bad. They haven't. I've enjoyed every single one, but you brought yourself to this conversation in a very different way today, and it brought out a different version of me. And it brought out a lot of things that I've never shared before. So I just want to acknowledge who you've become as an interviewer, if that's the
Wow.
title you want to have for this particular engagement.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Thank you.
So I'm curious about, what your future is like, because I think you're developing a real skill here, and who knows where that's going to take you, and who knows what that's going to open up in the people that you sit down and have conversation with, and the impact that will result. So that's exciting for me to. So you're a part of that future that I might imagine. And
Yeah,
you,
and just to say, like, I know that you've done things, but I'd love to be involved in anything you're doing if I can help out in any way, or help organize or whatever, or get the word out. I just want to put that out there.
thank you, Ronnie. Appreciate that. So you might have seen this as I've raised my hand a few times to gesticulate.
Yeah.
When I was in Sweden, I was there for the month of September. I crashed roller skiing. So to train for Nordic skiing, you're out there on roller skis, and I crashed and broke my thumb pretty badly. So why I mention that is that I have a lot of people coming to me and knowing that I have this goal of becoming the best skier I can possibly be. I want to see if I can win the world championship in 2023 for Masters. I don't care if I do or not. It's just it's an experiment. It's a game to play. So when this happened, I'm getting a lot of people saying, you must be so disappointed. You must be so sad. You must be like, what are you doing? Well, October, as I said earlier, I've trained 100 hours. I've never trained 100 hours before. This injury has not stopped me. It caused me to step out of my habitual ways of being. Even if my habitual ways of being are experimental, you still get stuck in some ruts this caused me to reinvent the wheel. And now suddenly my training has had this huge leap in evolution. And I'm training in a way that I never would have trained if this didn't happen. And my upper body is getting much stronger now than it was when I could use my hand. So I've invented a machine that I can train on without using my hands to get upper body strength.
Wow.
So it's caused me to rethink physical engagement, and it's got me even more excited about cross-country skiing. And maybe not this year, maybe next year, maybe this prevents me from skiing this year. That's fine. I don't care, because I'm just going to keep evolving the training process. So what does the future look like? It looks like obstacles turning into opportunities. That doesn't mean that I'm happy this happened. I'm not happy it happened. That's my part of my body got broken. That's not fun. That's not good for my well-being. So I'm not happy, but I will embrace the fact that it's true and real. I will embrace the fact that this is what I have to work with. And that's an opportunity for me to shake up the foundations that I was standing on and reinvent the wheel. At least in regards to how do I move my body? How do I move my upper body without a hand? So I will continue to do that in the future. And cross-country skiing, it'll last for as long as it lasts, and then it'll be something else. I'm constantly working on my books. I'm basically attempting to write a user's manual for the human brain, human beingness, which is a pretty ambitious project. And but I'm super excited about it, and I look like a crazy man. If you could see my walls, they're covered with these big writing boards, and I'm just surrounded by words, and I'm just always thinking and developing and philosophizing. And so hopefully my books get released and take off and make a difference, but they'll continue to evolve. And what do I see for the future? I don't know, and I want to keep it that way. Because if I know what the future looks like, then I'm just projecting. Because as an insecure person that has a tendency to be depressed, my projections are always negative. So if I look at the state of the world, if I even consider that there is something called the state of the world, immediately I'm going to have a negative response to it. Like I could list lots of things like Ukraine and what's going to happen in Europe this winter with gas and oil. Europeans have to heat their homes, where like if I start thinking about that, I go into a downward spiral. Artificial intelligence is already so advanced that it's going to be taking over more and more jobs within the next year. Like people don't realize how many things are now automated.
Yeah.
In the next calendar year, massive numbers of jobs will disappear. Not in 20 years, but next year. But I can't think about that. I know it's there. I know that I'm going to be 55 in 6 months, and I was 40 last week. So I'm going to be 70 next week.
Yeah.
It happens so fast. My girlfriend lives in Sweden. I live in Vermont, so we have this long distance thing that COVID, we had several years where we couldn't see each other. So I don't know. If I think about it, I can only see negative. So I don't think about it.
Yeah.
I curiously step towards. So what's going to happen in veganism? I don't know, but I'm happy to have a conversation with someone and facilitate them and help them transform something.
Sure.
But what is the story that will be told about any particular thing? I don't know, and I don't want to. Because I can only see the negative if I look. So I don't look. And that allows me to be happy and curious.
Well, the one thing I know, I hope that you continue to be part of my future, and maybe I can be part of your future as well. And there's so many things as I was going along. There's so many things popping into my mind to talk about that could have been another half hour and another, in themselves. So I would love to, get a chance to return to this conversation. Maybe we could do this every year or something, or every 6 months, and
Yeah, I love that.
and and I just want to, so we'll bring this to an end for now. But I want to thank everyone who's watched and listened, and please feel free to share this with others and give us feedback, any advice you want to give, and share this. Maybe you can rate this or like or subscribe, whatever you can do to support. And if you want to hear about the Fruit Festival in the UK, you can look at fruitfest.co.uk and find more information there. And you're very welcome to check that out. And maybe there'll be other things coming up as well. But thanks everyone for watching and listening. Tim, any last thoughts before we finish?
Yeah, it's great to watch and listen and like and subscribe and fun things like that. But really what it comes down to, as we said earlier, is community.
Yeah,
So if there's anybody listening or watching that wants to create that community in person and you have those Paul Revere skills, you are a connector, you're an extrovert, Ronnie would love your support. And it would help the community grow. So don't just like and subscribe and comment, reach out and change the physical world and change real people coming together in real places in real time.
the best thing.
Yeah,
I
we
don't,
will better by coming together. So
yeah, and that's why I've liked with running the festival. Um, the thing that I've liked about that, about offering that, and people pay to come, and there's other things that you can do in the world of even raw foods and things. There's other things you can do that are probably more uh, profitable or less time consuming or blah blah, all these things that are more logical. But when someone leaves the festival, I definitely know they got something out of that, you know. Whereas you could um, sell someone a product that they never use, they never take, they never, you know. So I always feel like people get way more than they pay for with coming to the festival. So I feel kind of like I like that aspect of it. But um, yeah, it's kind of become part of my life, Tim. That bringing people together is like so important in my mind, and I'm not the natural Paul Revere character. I really am, but I've had to embody as much of that as I could to um
you just need a guitar in your hand all the time because that's when that character actually emerges in you.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, it's and yeah, we could go on about that, but that it's such a special thing, and so it's a thing that I need. Never mind other people who definitely need it, but I need it over and over.
Yeah.
And the way you used to talk about Woodstock, similar to the way I used to feel about it, like, and I've told people this a number of times. You used to say it's the Woodstock Awesome People Festival, like it's good. Like never mind about the raw food and all. Like, this is just bringing together such a great community of people to spend time together and yeah, and so I really appreciate. I mean, I've got so many memories with you there, and the midnight runs and things like that that went on, or moonlight runs or whatever that was. Amazing times, and so many more to come, I'm sure. But thank you so much, Tim,
Yeah, thank you,
too,
Ron.
and for the impact that you've had, stepping outside of yourself, taking the chances you did. You know, people offered you these, to go and give a talk, but you were the one that went and pushed yourself to do that. So amazing, and I think that I speak for a lot of people who really appreciate you and are very grateful for everything you've done. So thank you very much, and I definitely recommend everyone go and check out Tim Van Orden, runningraw.com, and stay in touch with him and find out more about what he's doing. And thank you everyone for watching and listening. We'll see you in another episode of the Love Fruit podcast. And thank you for now.